forces, they are tricked into believing that they can succeed, and then once they don't, they die anyway and they go down to hell. What do you think?
Well, I would agree with that statement, Daniel. I mean, there's only two certainties, death and taxes, and eventually whatever your beliefs are, you're going to die. However, I don't see any good with getting involved with things like Marxism. It puts people in a bad frame of mind, if nothing else. It's a very cynical, selfish, nasty kind of worldview. And when you do away with ethics, when you consider that Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, who died in 1997, according to his daughter Zena LaVey, he allowed his own grandson to get sexually molested in front of him.
There's another freak. Well, let me...
I mean, so it's not very good, you know.
Yeah, and then it seems like I read somewhere on one of your websites, some poor freak says he's having sex with his grandmother or something there. I don't...
yeah, that was Alex Sanders, who was another big person in the Wicca Witchcraft movement.
It's a veritable freak
show. You can see that
show
on the Witchcraft page.
Yeah.
And he, in this film clip, he said that he had ritual sex with his grandma.
Yeah.
So that's really not a good way to go, you know?
Yeah, no. Well, I was thinking that particular page with that listing, I mean, that's a veritable freak show. I mean, just, you know, of people. But let me ask you something. It seemed like you just kind of slid this in, suggesting that perhaps George Bush is worse than the Nazis. I don't know if I misunderstood what you were saying, but if that is the case, how many deaths do you attribute to George W. Bush?
Well, that's incalculable when you consider what's going on in Iraq as we speak. Now, I don't want to say he's worse than the Nazis in the sense that he killed more people than the Nazis. What I am saying, though, is he seems to carry on their tradition of occultism and war, which I don't particularly think is of value to the human race.
Yeah. We have this question here. Mr. Kennedy, do you think there are body doubles for the rulers of the world, one for view and then one to rule in secret?
I've heard that before. I really don't. I haven't seen any evidence of that, to be honest. I've heard of that, though.
And have you came across any information regarding it as to whether or not there are secret underground bases where bizarre experiments are going on?
That's really tough to say when you look at things like this guy who was just arrested today, who killed himself, the anthrax mailer, the scientist.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of deranged stuff going on above ground in scientific institutions. So I'm really not sure what's going on underground. It's bad enough what's going on above ground, to be honest.
Okay. Well, I guess if you said the evil did exist, I would say that there's plenty of evidence for that. But, you know, I've also heard that, though, if someone is possessed by demons, that you really, if that person dies, that you really are not killing the demon, that it just goes and looks for another host. Is there a sure way to kill a demon?
Well, you can't kill a demon because in Christian theology, as created beings, our spirits are ultimately immortal. We will live forever. In Christianity, in the resurrection, you even get your body back eventually. So ultimately, death is overcome. Now, it depends on where you go after the resurrection. Some people will go to hell. Some people will go to heaven. So there's really no way to ultimately kill anybody or anything. We're ultimately immortal beings.
Well, I'm not a Catholic expert by any means, but don't you guys have like a third place to go? Purgatory? Is that what?
There's purgatory is an antechamber to heaven. Ultimately, you go from purgatory to heaven, so you'll wind up in heaven anyway.
So one way. Okay, so like you just kind of stop there.
You stop there, and that's just a place where for people who haven't reconciled with things they've done wrong during their life, kind of work through that before they enter heaven.
I see. Who made that up?
Well, it's not a matter of made up. It's really inferred from biblical scripture. You have things like the bosom of Abraham. And ultimately, heaven is just kind of a foyer. Purgatory, I'm sorry. Purgatory is a foyer to heaven. It's a place where you go and just say, you know, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done that. It's just when you have to work things out. ultimately purgatory is a predestination to heaven. You wind up in heaven.
Okay.
Everyone in purgatory winds up in heaven. Eventually.
But you wouldn't see any Nazis sitting up there in that room, would you?
Well, to be honest with you, Daniel, I'm not God, so I don't decide who goes to heaven or hell. I don't know.
Okay.
Now, if I died and went to heaven and everyone was there, whoever lived, like Hitler and Stalin, in that sense it would be none of my business because God decides who goes to heaven and hell, not William H. Kennedy.
All right. Okay. Well, that's good. We have this question, which I'm not too familiar with, but maybe you are, so I'll go ahead and ask it as the host. William, do you think that more decapitated heads will start rolling like the bus incident in Canada?
Well, that was such a bizarre thing, and there were all these weird murders. There was another nut who shot some teenagers swimming in a river. Just the other day we're seeing more and more of these bizarre shootings. I have another book about satanic shootings called Satanic Crime, A Threat in the New Millennium, where I go over things like the Columbine shootings and Jeff Weiss, who was the boy who shot up the Red Lake Indian Village a few years ago, and Asa Kuhn, another fellow in the Virginia Tech murders. So all these bizarre murders and killings, there's an increase in them. I'm not certain why. I wish I had a simple and pithy answer, but I think you will see more things like that in the future.
There's a picture out there, and we'll end the questions with this one here. And I think we actually had it on the Edge's website. Have you seen the picture of the homo hug between George W. Bush and John McCain?
Yeah, that was another bizarre thing. There's also kind of a homo hug between Bush and a guy who looks very much like Jeff Gannon, who was the disgraced White House reporter who turned out to be a male prostitute. So there's some very odd things going on in the White House that disturbed me deeply.
Okay. Well, William Kennedy, we're getting near the end of the program, so you can go ahead and say anything about your website you'd like to.
Well, go to williamhkennedy.com, williamhkennedy.com, and there's, as I said, I have these multimedia pages set up with hours and hours of the very best documentaries on occult history, Satanism, witchcraft. I have a Timothy Leary page, an Aleister Crowley page. I've organized it in a clear fashion, and I've gone through like 2 or 3 different movies and picked out the best one. Okay. So if you want a really solid education in occult history, I will say without hesitation, WilliamHKennedy.com is the best web page on the net.
Okay.
For that.
All right. Bill Kennedy, thank you so much for coming on the Edge television broadcast. Can we have you back on again sometime?
Sure. I had a great time, Daniel. There were some very humorous questions. My shows are very grim, but it was nice to have a little lightheartedness thrown in there, which gets me through the day. And thank you for having me on the Edge.
Thank you so much, Bill. All right.
Bye-bye now.
You have been listening to The Edge with Daniel Ott. To subscribe to the Edge newsletter, log on to theedgeam.com. That's theedgeam.com, where you can find out more about the guests and topics discussed on the air. The Edge is being brought to you by Internet Solutions, home of affordable website design and low-cost Internet access. Visit Internet Solutions at es4.com. That's es4.com. Until next week, for the Edge Radio broadcast, I'm Chris Moore. See you on the Edge.
News on the USA Radio Network is next.